The tidiest garden bed in 2024 was the one that got eaten first. I'm Grant, Fiona's here, and this is Rude Insect. Today we're talking about plants that attract beneficial insects, which sounds like a polite garden club topic, but honestly, this is pest control with flowers.
Flowers, herbs, and a willingness to let parts of the garden look slightly feral. That last bit is where people get nervous.
I used to think good bugs versus bad bugs meant ladybugs show up wearing capes and aphids leave town.
They do not. Beneficial insects are not magic. They just shift the odds. Lady beetle larvae, lacewing larvae, hoverfly larvae, tiny parasitic wasps, tachinid flies, ground beetles, minute pirate bugs. Those are the workers.
And some of them are not cute.
Most useful things in the garden are not cute. Compost, soaker hoses, a yogurt cup of soapy water for hornworms.
Fair. The big lesson from the article is that if you were starting a kitchen garden from bare soil, you might plant insectary strips before obsessing over tomato cages.
I would, especially in a Zone 6B clay under everything setup with 14 raised-ish beds. Because the beds near flowering dill, cilantro, calendula, yarrow, alyssum, fennel, marigolds, and messy herbs had fewer dramatic pest explosions.
Grant's garden mistake. I once pulled every bolted cilantro plant the second it looked scraggly because I wanted the bed to look clean. Then I complained that aphids had turned my zucchini stems into green powdered sugar. I had basically evicted the tiny wasp cafe and then blamed the neighborhood.
That is painfully accurate. Bolted cilantro is not a failure if you're feeding beneficial insects. Those little white umbrella flowers are perfect for small wasps and hoverflies.
So the ugly phase is the useful phase?
Often, yes. Adult hoverflies and parasitic wasps need nectar and pollen when pests are scarce, and they prefer small, shallow flowers. A giant dinner plate dahlia may be gorgeous, but tiny beneficial insects can't always use it well.
So dill is doing more than flavoring pickles.
Dill is one of the best. Let it flower near cucumbers, brassicas, and potatoes. It brings in hoverflies, ladybugs, lacewings, and small wasps. But don't plant one neat row in May and expect miracles.
Because it bolts and disappears the moment the weather gets rude.
Exactly. Sow a pinch every 2 to 3 weeks from April through early July. Tuck it into gaps. You're creating a staggered buffet, not a formal dill plantation.
And if you see green striped caterpillars on the dill?
Don't panic. Those may be swallowtail caterpillars, not cabbage worms. Wrong plant, different crew.
I love that. Identify the suspect before sentencing.
Please put that on a garden sign.
Now, I want to say if we plant enough dill and alyssum, we can throw away all pest control.
No, that is the overconfident Grant sentence I was waiting for.
I walked right into it.
You still use row cover. You still handpick hornworms. You still inspect kale for cabbage worms. Beneficial insect plants are the living layer in an organic pest plan. They reduce pressure. They don't replace paying attention.
What about the 2024 pest buffet? Aphids on zucchini, cabbage worms on kale, mystery chewing on peppers.
The interesting part was the scruffy bed. Overwintered parsley, flowering cilantro, and volunteer calendulas were nearby. And that bed stayed boring.
Boring is good.
Boring is excellent. A boring pest year means predators, parasitoids, timing, and plant diversity are doing quiet work before you reach for a spray.
Calendula gets a pass then.
Yes, within reason. Calendula flowers for a long time, reseeds, and supports pollinators and beneficials. Alyssum is also useful because it's low, small-flowered, and fits along bed edges. Yarrow is strong too, but give it space. Fennel is great for insects, but I'd keep it where it won't bully smaller crops.
Marigolds?
Useful, especially as part of a mixed planting. But don't treat one marigold at the end of a tomato row like a force field.
So, no magical orange security guards.
No, think habitat, repeated blooms, different flower shapes. Something blooming before, during, and after your main crops are vulnerable.
And leave a little mess.
Strategic mess, not lost a shovel in July mess. Let some cilantro flower. Let parsley overwinter if it wants. Leave a few volunteer calendulas. Keep paths manageable, but don't sterilize the whole place.
Fiona's 30-second verdict time. Should gardeners plant insectary strips for good bugs versus bad bugs?
Yes, if you can keep flowers blooming through the season. Maybe, if you only have room for one pot and expect it to fix everything. My concrete recommendation? Start with dill and cilantro, sowed every 2 to 3 weeks in spring and early summer, because their tiny flowers feed the helpers that eat aphids and parasitize pests.
So the takeaway is, stop treating every bolted herb like a personal insult.
Correct. Sometimes the plant that looks like it gave up is actually running the pest control department.
We'll leave you with that. Plant the cafe before the aphids arrive, and let the tiny staff clock in. If this helped, hit subscribe. We drop 3 new episodes every week on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, so you don't have to hunt for the next one.
Thank you for listening to this edition of RudeInsect.com, Conversations with Grant and Fiona.